Yes, I mean, some people often think that if you're an atheist, you don't believe in God, then you can't have a morality, and there's no foundation to morality, and morality is in question, and so forth. And so they're worried that, you know, if God is dead, then morality is going to go with him. And I think that's, you were saying earlier, you don't agree with that. It's amazing to me that people in the current world still think that way.
The Ten Commandments represent an objective, God-based morality which you guys can't stand. The question that must be asked is, how would God and my God-based text judge this action? Not how do I feel about it, or what is my opinion. And everything that is good comes from a God-centered morality. He and He alone is the true reason that something is right and something is wrong.
Before dealing with that point, I want to deal with a number of issues that were raised in the comments to the earlier videos. I think this is best done by defining exactly what I mean. When I refer to objective morality, I'm referring to the dictionary definitions. Objective, based on real facts and not influenced by personal beliefs or feelings. Morality, a personal or social set of standards for good or bad behavior and character, or the quality of being right, honest, or acceptable. My contention is that there is no such thing as objective morality floating around in the ether, which would be there regardless of whether or not mankind was here to witness it, unlike, for example, gravity, which would still cause the Earth to orbit the Sun, regardless of whether we were here to witness it or not. I also want to suggest that God's system of morality is sick and twisted, and it is not one that any right-minded person would want to follow. Also, although connected to the first point, I'll suggest that the Bible is a useless source of morality, and also that the Ten Commandments are laughably lacking in giving any serious direction as to how one should lead your life. So how can I say that objective morality does not exist? Firstly, evidence. There is no more evidence for it than there is for the existence of God. After the previous video in this series, it was suggested to me by way of private message that if we had heard of a circle, but we had never seen one and we couldn't comprehend one, that does not mean that a circle could not objectively exist. I imagine that the point being made was this, that objective morality may exist, but we just don't recognize it. It can't be seen, and we don't know what it is. I find this argument utterly vacuous. Is it seriously being suggested that objective reality is floating around in a dimension that we cannot access or comprehend, yet this is a standard by which we will ultimately be judged? What kind of sick God is this? One that says, I will judge you by a set of standards, but I'm not going to tell you what they are? Whilst of course it is possible that objective morality is floating around in the ether, I dismiss the concept with the same level of confidence that I would dismiss the statement made by anyone who told me that the sun would not rise tomorrow. However, many will say that the Bible evidences God's objective morality, and of course in particular the Ten Commandments. This argument was in fact advanced by Brock in a recent conversation I had with him on a blog TV program. During the course of the conversation, I posed the question that I raised in the previous video, namely the issue of the doctor's dilemma in the New Orleans hospital during Hurricane Katrina. In particular, the question I raised was this: what does your good book tell you that the objectively moral thing to do was in such circumstances? His response, a typical example of his circumlocution, was to try and say that I was confusing morality and ethics. When I repeatedly asked him to explain the difference between ethics and morality, he failed to do so in any meaningful way. The conversation ended prematurely when the host of the program ran out of patience and kicked him from the room. Let me explain my point again, so that he and anyone else can, if they wish, address it. If objective morality exists, and it is evidenced in the Bible, then what does the Bible tell you to do in relation to the situation at the New Orleans hospital? If that one is too troublesome for you, Then here is a more simplistic one that you may wish to consider.
Now imagine that you're out for a walk and suddenly you see a runaway trolley. The driver is slumped over the steering mechanism, and that trolley is headed down a track, and you can see that it's going to kill 5 unsuspecting workmen. And you're there, and there's a switch, and if you push the switch, it'll divert the trolley down a side track, but there's another workman down there, and he will be killed.
Well, what are you going to do? I'll give you all the time you need to decide, but if your decision is based on the concept of objective morality as evidenced in the Bible, then I challenge you to justify it. Quote chapter and verse in a video response. And would your decision be affected if the one person was your father or brother, sister, mother, a close friend? Let's make the problem a little bit more problematic.
All right, now, second problem is called the footbridge problem. And it's the same sort of thing. You're walking on top, you're on a footbridge crossing a trolley track, and you see a runaway trolley again. The driver's slumped over the steering mechanism, and it's headed down the track, and there are 5 workmen that are going to be killed. And there's this big man next to you with a big knapsack on, and if you push him down to his death, he'll stop the trolley, and he'll keep the 5 guys from being killed. Okay, now, I know what you're thinking. No, you can't jump, okay? You've got to push the guy to solve this problem.
So again, what would you do? Would your decision be affected by how you felt about the person? What if it was a good friend or relative? Or what if it was an enemy? I repeat, my point is that these are not issues that you are going to derive the answer from the Bible. They are not objective. They are subjective. In relation to the 10 Commandments, it's worth noting that these are the only words directly spoken by God. The rest of the Bible is merely inspired by God. What I find of note is this, that whilst Moses was at the top of the mountain, God was so busy dictating the commandments to Moses that he failed to see that his chosen people were busy at that very moment making a false idol, despite the fact that they were at the bottom of the very same hill that he was at the top of, talking to Moses. What is wrong with this God? Can he not multitask?
Let's go back to New Orleans and we'll finish there. On September 11th, when they got back to the hospital, there were 45 bodies in the chapel. As people had been dying, they had moved them into the chapel. But on the last day, when they got most people out, there were some others that were put in there at the end. 17 of them. And the autopsies showed that quite a few of them had massive doses of morphine and midazolam, a Valium-like drug. Massive doses. Doses that would be lethal.